колеги и приятели! Добре дошли на нашия индоевропеистичен семинар. Първия за тази година. Надяваме се не последния. Имаме скъп гост от нашия колега от Базел, Gerard Spaans, който е докторант в Базелския университет на Михил Деван. Той се занимава с албански език, с история на албанския език, с историческа фонетика и морфология. И в момента е на специализация в Солунския университет и ние имаме щастието той да ни гостува и да ни говори за историята на албанския език. Заповядайте. Много благодарим.
Okay.
Do you speak Bulgarian? That was the question.
No. He will speak in English, but I presented him in Bulgarian.
It was a nice presentation.
So, welcome everyone. So, yes, I will not be speaking Bulgarian or Albanian, I will be speaking in English. I'm very happy to be able to be here and speak about the history of Albanian with you. So I studied Indo-European linguistics in Leiden in the Netherlands. I'm Dutch. After my studies I started my PhD in Basel. And actually only then I started working on Albanian. So I've only been doing it for a little bit over 2 years. But I really like it. And there is a lot to do still. So today I'm going to give like an overview of the language history of Albanian. So we will be going from Proto-Indo-European towards Old Albanian. And then I want to do a case study with you. We will reconstruct the system of the possessive pronouns in Albanian. So we will just see how far we can come. So first, Albanian as an Indo-European language. So as you probably know, Albanian forms its own branch within Indo-European. So here you can see, don't look too much at the specifics of the branching, but just as an example of how you can look at it. It does not mean that Albanian has been split off from Proto-Indo-European on its own the whole time. It just means that all of the sister languages that Albanian has had since Proto-Indo-European have disappeared in time. We don't know them. So Albanian is the only language of its branch that we know. And Albanian is basically split into 2 dialect groups, a northern one called Gaelic and a southern one called Tosk. This is like a basic piece of information that you absolutely need to know when studying Albanian. So you can see here that Gaelic is spoken mostly in northern Albania and in Kosovo, a bit in Montenegro, a little bit in North Macedonia. And Tosk, on which the standardized version of Albanian has been based, is spoken mostly in southern Albania, but also from there in Greece and in Italy. And even a small dot in the village of Mandrica in Bulgaria that you can see is a Tosk variety. I think in the Ottoman era some Albanians were invited there by the Ottomans to give them dairy products and they could live there. And then in the end of the Ottoman period, most of them moved to Greece actually. That's why the village is really small now. So, what do we know about the developments from Proto-Indo-European, so from 6,000 years ago, towards the first stage that we will look at, pre-Proto-Albanian, so Albanian as spoken in Antiquity. Actually, we hardly know anything. We only know a few sound changes from the inherited lexicon that we can compare with other branches, but it's still hardly anything. So about language contexts and grammatical changes or syntactical changes, we actually don't know anything. So, for example, here you can see some words in both Albanian and Latin and Greek, where you can see that at least it appears that an Proto-Indo-European S in the beginning of a word, when followed by an accented vowel, seems to have developed into J. So we see that Latin serpent for snake and Albanian jarper, ancient Greek hypnos for sleep and Albanian jum. Also the change of pne to me seems quite like something you would expect, with the labiality of the P and the nasality of the N merging into an M. And the word for six, in Latin we have sex, and in ancient Greek hex, also coming from an S. And the first part of the Albanian word josht, so t is a suffix, and josh perfectly matches the word for six. But for example, in the word for pig, Latin sus and ancient Greek hus, or also sus, we don't find j in Albanian, we find a th. So Albanian thi, or in Gaelic thai for pig or swine. So was there a separate development when the S was followed by we don't know actually. So this is just as an example. There are some things that we have an idea about, but we cannot really make the complete picture yet. So just to give some chronology and terminology, so I've made this timeline of the part of the history of Albanian that we can sort of say something about. So all the way on the right is the present, and below you can see in blue modern Albanian in about the last 200 years. Before that we have Old Albanian, which is like the earliest literature we have, very recent actually, so only about from the start of the Ottoman Empire. We have a lot of Slavic influence, all the way from when the Slavs came into the Balkans. Our next stage that we usually have a term for is Proto-Albanian. So I will put these here. So Proto-Albanian is the stage between a really big influx of Latin loanwords at the end of Antiquity, and the split of the two major dialect groups. So you can see in red the Latin influence in the first few centuries of the Common Era, and then we have Proto-Albanian, and then we have the split of Tosk and Gaelic. And so we have this big load of Latin loanwords from around the turn of the millennials, and we call the period of Albanian from before the Latin loanwords pre-Proto-Albanian, and there has probably been some ancient Greek influence around that. That's actually my part of our project in Basel. So now we're going to look at Albanian in Antiquity, or pre-Proto-Albanian. So here is a map of the Greek dialects in Antiquity. A lot has been said and tried about which tribe in antiquity might be the ancestors of the Albanians. Well, sadly, we still don't know. It is all way too obscure. We hardly know anything about all of these languages, like Illyrian, Thracian, Messapic, Dardanian. They have all been called the ancestor of Albanian by someone at some point, but we just know way too little of these languages to say something about it. We also don't know where they lived in the Balkans, probably somewhere in the southern Balkans if the Albanians were in contact with the Greeks, but still, were they at the coast, were they more inland, so maybe like where North Macedonia and Kosovo are right now, or maybe even a little bit more to the north. We don't know. So, I've already mentioned there seems to have been some language contact between pre-Proto-Albanian and Doric northwestern Greek. So, we will look at a few of these loanwords afterwards. So, for this it's good to keep in mind how can we tell that something is Doric? Doric Greek preserves a long A, whereas Ionic and Attic, the two biggest branches or dialects of ancient Greek, have developed them into E. And in the same way, a short E is usually a short A in Doric. So here are a few of these loanwords. So on the left side you first see the Ionic Attic Greek word. So for example for sickle it's drepanon, and in Doric it's drapanon, so with an A instead of an E. And in Albanian we have draper, or in Gaelic drapen, where we have this A, which matches with the Doric one. And we see the same thing for the word for millstone in Albanian, mokker. In this case we have an O, which comes from a long A, so it cannot come from megane in most ancient Greek dialects, but it can come from magana, and it also cannot come from Latin magina, because in that case you have an E which would cause palatalization, but we still have a K and not a Ch, so it cannot be Latin. That's why in this case also the Doric form matches the Albanian form the most. Same thing for the word for apple, melon in most ancient Greek dialects, but malon in Doric, and we have mol in Albanian, in which O comes from long A, so the Doric form. And then the word for firewood, skaripos in ancient Greek, where in ancient Greek the phi was still pronounced as p, whereas in modern Greek it would be an F, but in Albanian skarp we have a P. So it seems like when Albanian borrowed this word, this sound was still the plosive P or P, borrowed as a P. So it must have been borrowed in a very early stage of ancient Greek, when the aspirated stops had not become fricatives yet. So there is a set of about maybe 20 to 40 of these possible loanwords from ancient Greek, almost all of them in agricultural semantic fields. For some of them you could hypothetically still say that they might be inherited words, but since we are talking about agricultural terminology, it seems like something that has been introduced in the region exactly around this period of time, the early antiquity. And also sometimes the phonology shows that it cannot be inherited. So for scarp, the sequence sk cannot in any way come from Proto-Indo-European. So you would expect it maybe to come from sk, but that normally yields g in Albanian. So, for example, in the word for to know, in Latin we have gnosko, with a quite well-known sk suffix in Indo-European, but in Albanian we have njoh, and not njoshk or something like that. So on to late antiquity. In the first few centuries of our era, the Balkans were Christianized, also the Albanians. This was paired with a lot of loanwords from Latin, as I've mentioned in the timeline. It's really hundreds of words, a lot of them in Christian terminology, but also a lot in just everyday terminology. So it's not only in the Christian sense. Although it is a bit sad that all of these loanwords replaced a lot of inherited words, very probably it's also very helpful, because in this case we actually know some like Albanian words from the stage between pre-Proto and Proto-Albanian, because we know the Latin source. We know that it has been borrowed by this phase of Albanian, so we know what it looked like at that point. And then we know the modern Albanian form, so we can see the developments. So they are also very helpful when it comes to reconstructing the history of Albanian. So, on to the early Middle Ages. So now we will call it Proto-Albanian. So again, the Latin loanwords, but now we're going to look at the developments. So here I gave a list with some colors. I hope you can see them. So let's just put them all there at once. So we can see quite a lot of developments here. So Latin sanitatem for health, probably borrowed as something like sanitate. In Albanian it's shëndet, or even further shortened to shnit. The word for kite, so the bird of prey with like the forked tail. In Latin, accipiter, in Albanian, shift. The word for green, it meant yellow in Latin, but semantics. So galbinus in Latin, gelber in Albanian. And the word for bed, stratum in Latin, strat. This one's quite obvious actually. And the word for time, ora, to hair. So we can see that a lot has happened to Albanian since Albanian has borrowed these words from Latin. So I wrote down a few of the developments that we can see. So S to sh, for example in sanitatem to shëndet. An umlaut, so a becoming a when followed by a front vowel in the next syllable, so either a or e. So for example, galbinus, the e causes the a to rise in the mouth, so it becomes gelber and not jolber or galber. Palatalization, so in the same word, so in galbinus the e first turns a into e, and then the g is followed by a front vowel, so then also the g can become j. We see that in contrast to the ancient Greek loanwords, in this case long a became a, so stratum to strat, but for example in the malon to mol in ancient Greek, we had a different development. So in this case we can tell that this change of long a to o must have happened after the ancient Greek loanwords, but before the Latin loanwords. Otherwise the Latin loanwords would have done the same. Most importantly probably is the weakening of unaccented vowels. So basically around maybe the year 700 we estimate, only the accented vowel, so the vowel in the word that bore the stress, was retained, and all others were either completely dropped or when you really needed a vowel for the pronunciation, retained as schwa. So written with a with 2 dots on top. So there are quite extreme examples of this, so you can also see it here everywhere, that only the accented vowel is the one that remains. Even when there are 4 vowels in Latin, only one of them remains as the full vowel. And finally, the Tosk rhotacism. So somewhere between 800 and 1100 the dialect splits, and the biggest change is that in the Tosk, in the southern dialects, an N between 2 vowels was turned into R. So in Galbinus, probably borrowed as Galbinu, there is an N between 2 vowels. So in Tosk we have Gelber. And in Geg, I think the word has been replaced by something else, but you would expect Gelben in this case. So we know a lot of these changes, and we can even order them chronologically. So we will do that based on 2 examples now. So let's take sanitatem to shendet. So first the Latin word was borrowed. Then we have the umlaut, so actually twice in the same word. So sanitate, we twice have an A followed by a front vowel. So then we have something like shenitete. The change of S to sh, we cannot really determine when it happens, but we will just put it in there already. Also the shortening of long A to short A, or the shortening of long A to short A, is not really easy to tell, so I also applied it already here. Then we must have had the vowel reduction, so shenitete to something like shintet, with or without a schwa in the first syllable. Now the vowel reduction has yielded the right environment for postnasal voicing. So because the E is gone between the N and the T, we now have a sequence nt, which became nde, so shendet. And then in some of the dialects it has been further reduced, probably by non-pronunciation of the schwa to schnet. And for Galbinus, we will do it a bit quicker now. So it was borrowed. The quality of the final vowel we cannot really tell, neither based on the phonology nor based on the grammar. At least there must have been something there. So first we have the umlaut again, so AI becoming EI. And then the palatalization. If it would be the other way around, the G would have been retained, but we can see that G has become J, so that must have happened after the umlaut. Vowel reduction again, and this is why we know that there must have been some vowel following it, because we have rhotacism in Tosk. If there would not have been a vowel in the end, then word final N would not become rhoticized. So there must have been something there. So we can just write an there after the vowel reduction, and you can compare it to the word for heart, where zemmer in Old Albanian also became zemmer, so that gelber probably also existed, having become gelber. This is another problematic thing that I need to mention at least. That is the relationship between Albanian and Daco-Romans, or Balkan Romans, if you have to call it that. So, at least from what we know from historical data, as far as we know, so we have the Albanian, so this is like a picture of the Balkan Sprachbund, Albanian in orange, Daco-Romans, so that's Romanian in the north, and in the Balkans, further south, there's Aromanian, Megleno-Romanian, and Istro-Romanian. But they are quite far apart. How can there have been a relationship between them? It's really a matter of debate, but fact is there are some, maybe even up to 200 lexical correspondences between Albanian and Romanian, even though they do not belong to a same branch of Indo-European. So Romanian is Romance and Albanian is Albanian. So there are a few examples. So the word for badger, usually vjedu in Albanian and vjezure in Romanian, and in Aromanian jezura or jezara. Also the word for fur, breath, and Romanian brat or brat. A word for doe, so female deer, soet in Albanian, and chut or chute, meaning hornless. And, well, female deers are usually hornless, so it's also a nice correspondence. Or thumbu for button, and sambura, bit of a fruit. So this is really a matter of debate that most people don't like, because since there seems to be a connection between the two, probably language contact in some way, this would mean that either the Albanians or the Romanians have moved since this period of time, and both usually want to claim authority over the area where they live now. But that's not really possible considering this language contact. So we don't know where this happened. We don't know exactly when, probably around the 7th or maybe 8th century based on the phonology, but we don't really know. And we also don't know what exactly happened. Was it just language contact? Was it a big migration of speakers of one of the languages starting to speak the other language? We really don't know. Of course, around the same time, the Slavs entered the Balkans, resulting in a lot of Slavic loanwords. So I wrote some of them here. Usually it's not really easy to tell what the exact source is. You can only say that it's Slavic. So like the word for south, jug in Albanian, it's definitely Slavic, but was it directly borrowed from Proto-Slavic, or was it borrowed from any of the later Slavic languages? You cannot really tell. Bisedoi, for to talk, at least, it has several also non-accented full vowels, so this one must be a little bit later, so it cannot be from Proto-Slavic. And obor, clearly Slavic, but it can come from any Slavic language and from any moment in time. And matze, or the older form mats, with the definite form matza, clearly corresponds to the Slavic, but it can come from any language. A little something about Old Albanian. So the first sentence that we have is from 1462. So for Indo-European languages, that's very late. So that's only a little bit over 500 years ago, when we are talking about like 6,000 years of a language history. Having only written evidence for 500 years is not a lot. The first book was around 100 years later, the Meshari by John Buzuku. Very important for the study of Albanian. So this one was found, I think, in the archives in Venice or in the Vatican, I don't really know. But it probably survived time because the first few pages are missing. And at some moment in Italy, they burned all of the books that were not seen as literature that the people should read, and probably Albanian books were part of this category, but because the first few pages were missing, they did not have the title page, so they did not see that it was a book that they were meant to burn. So that's why it survived. Old Albanian, it's mostly just Christian literature. So people writing their thoughts about Bible verses and stuff like that. And again, it's very important to keep in mind the distance in time between modern Albanian and Old Albanian is only around 500 years in a history of like 6,000 years. So between Old Albanian and Proto-Indo-European, more than 5,000 years ago. So when you are searching through Old Albanian literature for archaisms, there is still a really big chance that the archaism that you found is an innovation from the 5,500 years before. I cannot stress this enough. And finally, Turkish loanwords, of course. So during the also almost 500 years of Ottoman rule, especially in the semantic field of lifestyle, so like things in and around the house, in the way that you live, according to the Ottomans, there's a lot of loanwords. I don't think we need to discuss them. So now we will go to the second part of the presentation. I thought it was maybe nice to do some reconstruction. So as a case study, I decided to take the possessive pronouns. This is a topic that I myself really love. This really feels like a jar of gold within the Albanian language if you want to do reconstructions. And I've never talked about it before, so I thought let's do it now. So when you want to reconstruct within Albanian, my advice is to just start from the data that we have, so from modern and Old Albanian, and just work your way down in time as much as you can. You cannot really get very far, you will never get to Proto-Indo-European, but at least it's way better than doing it the other way around. Taking the Proto-Indo-European as reconstructed based on the other branches and then trying to work your way up to Albanian is not going to yield anything usually. And another piece of advice is to be very careful about the unaccented vowels. Like I said, when a vowel was not accented in like 700 to 800, it was completely reduced or even lost. So if you see unaccented full vowels in modern Albanian, you have to be a bit careful there. This is also the case for endings. So here I wrote the paradigms of the word for bird and the word for girl. So I marked the endings with a stripe. So what you can see here for the word for bird, zoog, so in the plural, zoj, there is no actual plural ending. The only thing that's there is a palatalization. And like I told you, a consonant was palatalized when a front vowel, so I or E, was following. So what can we conclude here? Before the vowel reduction, there must have been an I or E as a plural ending there. So it's still left its traces in the palatalization in the plural, in zoj, but the vowel itself is gone. It's not there anymore. So also the endings were prone to the vowel reduction. You can see it in some more of the endings, but I think I will leave that for now. So here is the modern Albanian possessive system. You might already think, okay, that's quite a lot. So each time in the left column there's the word for friend, either masculine or feminine. And in the right column there is the possessive pronouns. So shoku im, my friends, and in the genitive, dative or ablative, shokut tim, of my friend, to my friend, from my friend. Just so you know how to read this table. There seem to be quite a lot of forms, but if you want to reconstruct, there's actually not a lot of data in here yet. But it is very nice because, let's go back. If we compare in the top table on the right for the plural possessum, so when there are several friends, then we have the normal or the expected Albanian adjectives, so shocket a me, the friends of me, so with a me clearly being an adjective. But for the others, so shoku im is not on first sight an adjective. And the reason for this is that at some point before the vowel reduction, these adjectives were contracted together and the accent shifted. So what we basically have here is, so that in the right on the top in a me, a is some kind of a linking article that you need to build an adjective in Albanian, and me is like a possessive pronoun, so it's of me, sort of. But a is unaccented and has been reduced. We actually don't really know what the source of this a is, because it's a full vowel. But you can see in shokve te me, in the te, that the vowel has been reduced. So that's normally how it went. But because so that's only in a quarter of the cases, but in all other, it was contracted and the accent shifted to the linking article, with the result that the full form of the vowel was preserved in 3 of the 4 cases. So that's why it can be very interesting to look at this. So now we're going to look at the possessives as we can take them from Buzuku, so from the first book in Albanian that we have. Note that there is actually another case that I did not include here, the instrumental or locative or prepositional case, but it's basically the same as the accusative. The only difference is that in the right top column, you don't have a but te. So we can just leave it out for now. I think we already have enough forms to look at this point. So now we are just going to one by one analyze this and try to make some structure out of it. First of all, there are some secondary suffixes, so I marked them in red here. So, for example, in the feminine singular possessum, so my female friend, shocheja eme, the e in the end is clearly just a feminine marker. So m, just like in the masculine form to the left, must be the actual form of the word. And in the plural possessum, in the genitive dative and in the ablative, we have some secondary suffixes taken from the nominal declension. So let's take for instance here, tineve, it must be tine as we can see it a little bit more on the left, but it just has taken the ve ending from the genitive dative plural to mark it as different from the singular possessum. And the same for the ablative. So we can take all of these out. So now I put an asterisk in front of some of the forms. That's the ones that we have reconstructed a bit. So the ones that I have taken the ending from have an asterisk now, because that means that it has not been attested in this way, but we can assume that it must have existed in this form. So now we are going to try to split the article from the possessive pronoun. So I marked the pronouns in red and you can see quite a good structure. So in my, you see that everything ends with an M, and we actually have the accented form me in the plural possession. For your singular, so your friend, we have a T everywhere, which connects quite well with the accented to, so probably when the accent shifted to the first syllable, the long U was not accented anymore and could just completely drop. So, for example, your female friend, Shotjeya Jot, probably comes from Jotu, but because the tu was unaccented, it became Jot. Whereas for our and for your plural, we see the same thing everywhere. So we always have a possessive pronoun ne for our and always a je for your. So yes, like I said, we can compare it in the top column to the me and the tu that we have. So we can split them, and now I've put the articles in a separate column in the middle. So now we have the word for friend on the left, the article that we are trying to reconstruct in the middle, and the possessive pronoun or whatever, at least the thing marking my, your, our or your on the right. So a little bit of a correction. I told you that there was post-nasal voicing. So we see schoin tand and shotjenne tand with nd. So we can correct that to a T, just to have a T everywhere. Also, if we look in the your plural conjugation, we see some lengthenings. This is because an o, probably in a quite late stage of Proto-Albanian, an o could be lengthened to long o before some word final consonants, among which the y, and then it was diphthongized to uo. And for shortchi u, it's just u becoming longer in front of the y. So given this piece of information, we can reconstruct all of these uos to short o, and the long u to short u. So that's what we have here, and we can already see a little bit more structure coming up. So, let's see. Oh yeah, so that's just, we can see in the top column that the possessives were probably me and tu before, so also in the unaccented ones we can reconstruct it in this way. And when we look at the bottom column, we have ne for our and y for your. If you know a little bit of Albanian, ne probably reminds you a bit of na, which is the dative enclitic of the first person plural pronoun. So to us, if you move that to the front, you have na. And an a was usually, that could be the only vowel that was always kept as a schwa, or at least in a lot of cases. So since we don't have jon, but jonne, it seems like there must have been an a there and not another kind of vowel. So we can reconstruct that as na, whereas for the y, the pronoun for you plural is you, and we don't really have anything else to go by. So also the enclitic pronoun is you. We don't really have any other form, so let's reconstruct it as you as well. So now we are going to look at the accusatives. So we see some quite different forms, in this case in the singular possessum. So te mi, ton tu, ta na, and tant you, tant you. Actually, it seems like we can just make ton out of it. So if we go back again, ton is the most, well, the form that catches the eye the most, because it does have, it seems to have like a complete form. And if we look at the paradigm for hour, we have ta, na, so it's actually already followed by another n. And also interestingly, this n was not roticized in Tosk. So there probably was something going on there. And that what you can theorize here is that probably there was another n, so that it was also ton, na, and that the double n was not subject to roticism in Tosk. In your plural we have tant, you, so tant, nasalized, so we can just take the nasalization out of the a and put it as an n afterwards. And in my, te, me, we also have a nasal consonant following, and the e is probably the result of umlauts from the following e, so a, e to e. So it seems like this was also tan, me to ten, me, and then the cluster of nme becoming just me. So we can actually reconstruct tan in all of the cases for the accusative. They left traces behind everywhere. Okay, this might hurt your eyes a bit, but we have tried to give some structure to it. So every article that is the same, I gave them the same color here, and we will do some more analyzations here. So we will first look at the feminine possessum. So just to have a better view, let's take out the other colors. So we have quite neat green, red, yellow, orange, and then brown for 3 of the 4 columns. But in the top one, if we go back, we have the same one as for the masculine. So my male friend and my female friend have the same color pattern. It seems very much like this is actually the masculine one, and the whole feminine paradigm has at some point been replaced by the masculine one with a feminine ending e. So we can just take the yo, tan, sa, sol that we see in 3 of the 4 cases and project it on the one for me as well. So instead of e, tan, si, si, we also get yo, tan, sa, sol. Whereas for the masculine, we do have the tan, ti, si for the accusative, genitive, dative, and the ablative in every case. But in the first singular we have m in gag and im in tosk. This one is a bit out of the ordinary, and in your friend, shochi, ui, uit, there is an extra y, probably analogical to the second person plural, the y that you see in ui. So it seems like, since we can explain these as possible analogical changes, u might be the original form here, but u is a very problematic sound actually in Albanian. There are not a lot of possible sources for this one, and definitely not a possible one within the paradigm. So usually people that analyze these forms don't want to reconstruct an u just because, arguing from Proto-Indo-European, you can never get an u there. But looking at the Albanian data, it's about as far as we can come. So I suggest, without knowing anything more about it, we just leave the u there. And for the plural possessum, we do have a nice pattern in both of these with the plural possessors. So I already told you in the singular possessor, these are probably innovations. They probably had a similar form as the rest at some point, and they have been replaced by the normal Albanian form of adjectivization. So we can just copy that and put it there as well. It very probably must have been like this at some point between pre-Proto-Albanian and Proto-Albanian. Probably Proto-Albanian. So this is what we have now. Then one more thing. We are getting very obscure here, and it becomes less less certain what we are doing. But if we look at the accusatives, maybe we can still reshape the whole thing a little bit. So we see some tos and sos for the feminine here. We see some ton for the masculine, which seems like it could be original. But we also have ton in the feminine, whereas most of the feminine forms are, in this case, we are arguing from Proto-Indo-European. Usually the articles also in other languages are in some way derived from laryngeal 2, yielding long a in any language. In Albanian, long a yielding o. So the o that we can see in the to and the so here, we also have the so here. So maybe the ton that we see for the feminine was also an introduction, and it replaced original ton, coming from tegen, from tam. And then the same thing here, we see ta and si, but for the plural and for the masculine we have ton and si. So I already argued why we have ton everywhere here. Here there is also some nasals here and there, so maybe also the ta that we see here. So I'm not very certain about it, but you could argue that we just have ton in all of the cases for masculine and ton in all of the cases for feminine. Whereas for the genitive dative we still don't have like a perfect parallel. We could try to work something out here. So why do we have yellow here and red here? So sa and to, they don't match, whereas t and t do match. But we really can't. So for neither of the two, I can find any model or reason to assume any analogical change. So if there would have been to here, I could not find a reason why it would be replaced by sa. And if there would have been sa here, I cannot find any reason why it would be replaced by to. So the best way is to just keep it like it is. So this is what we have reconstructed so far for probably a phase somewhere between Proto-Albanian and pre-Proto-Albanian. And just for fun, we can transpose what we just reconstructed on Buzuku and see how many of the forms are different. So that's what we did. So here we have the reconstructed paradigm again, and let's make Buzuku out of it. So every form that has 2 asterisks is a form constructed by me based on the reconstructions based on Buzuku. So you take Buzuku, reconstruct, and then make Buzuku again. And then this is what you get. So basically the whole top right, so it has been replaced by the modern Albanian adjective system. So the whole thing is constructed. But also especially for the feminine ones, there seem to be a lot of forms that have been replaced between Proto-Albanian and Buzuku, if you argue in this way. And quite interestingly, So on the top right, the forms have been replaced. So we don't have tem, but we have a me. Why is that the case? Well, looking at the paradigm right now, so this is what Buzuku would look like if there were no analogical changes at all, then the paradigms for the singular possessum and the plural possessum are almost the same, probably due to phonological mergers before pre-Proto-Albanian. So, why do we have a me instead of them, for example, in the plural possessum now? Probably because it just looked way too much like the singular paradigm, and they had to do something different to mark it again as a separate paradigm. And probably that's how they changed the forms to the modern ones. Whereas for our and for your, maybe because the forms were not used as much, they did not solve it in the same way. So we do see the same distribution and the same resemblance, but they just put suffixes behind some of the forms to mark them as plural instead of singular. So I think if you look at it in this way, I think you can argue why for my friends and your friends and for our friends and your friends, the forms are quite secondary because they resembled the singular ones too much, and in both sets of the paradigms it was solved in a different way. So it must have also been solved in different moments in time, probably. So if what we have now, if we would further reconstruct it, just because we can, so this is what I reconstructed based on Buzuku. Now just apply some of the sound changes that we know. So mostly O coming from long A and S coming from Ts. We get something like this. It seems a little bit more structured again, which is usually the development. You have a quite neat system, but phonological changes cause irregularities, and then analogies mix it all up even more in a way trying to solve it. So you would expect going back that it becomes more regular, and that's what we see. So what we actually did is just etymologically and analogically fix Buzuku's possessive system. And by doing so, you can actually reconstruct quite a lot for the fact that we usually say that within Albanian you cannot really do much. Still, the masculine singular form U remains very obscure and unexplained. And beware again, calculating from Proto-Indo-European to modern Albanian, the system of Buzuku is at 92% of the past, of the time that has passed. So we still miss 92% of the information. So what we reconstruct here is probably still quite far from how it actually looked like. So yeah, we are still missing thousands of years of mostly analogical changes probably. But if we compare it to the modern Albanian system, so we will do that again, we can see that only these 500 years did yield a lot of information. So that just to be aware that there is something that you can do here. So we will look at that one again. And then I'm going to do something that I actually really don't like for Albanian, is we are going to make quasi-Indo-European out of the paradigm that we just did. So you remember the table that we just had, and now looking at this again you think, yeah, this has been so reduced, you cannot do anything with this. So especially here where we have tana, 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 tuai, 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 tona, 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 tuaya, tuaya, tuaya. It's all merged and it's all the same, so you cannot reconstruct anything there. So it's really thanks to Buzuku and the other early authors that we can actually do reconstructions with the possessives. And well, because we know how the demonstrative pronouns or articles, we do have an idea of how we reconstruct them for other languages. And if we do the same in this case, so here we have what we reconstructed for pre-Proto-Albanian, and then if we make quasi-Indo-European out of it, you actually do get a system here that quite resembles what we usually reconstruct. So if you compare the forms that are reconstructed here to what we know from, for example, Latin and ancient Greek and Sanskrit, there are quite some things that look like they fit, but there are also quite a lot that don't. And that's probably because of all of the information that we're missing and analogical changes that we cannot track. And lastly, before I finish, I wanted to show you a visualization of some of the forms, so only the nominative and accusative of my and your in the singular, from late Proto-Albanian to modern Tosk and Gag through the old stages. Just again to show how common analogical changes to these systems are. So above I gave the system that I think we can reconstruct for late Proto-Albanian. So there's already some changes here. So Shotjeya, Ime, it must have been Yome or maybe Yeme with an umlaut at some point, but it has already been replaced. We don't see any traces of this in any Albanian dialect existing. So this change must have happened before the split of the dialects. But you can see that between late Proto-Albanian and then the dialect split, both, so in Old Tosk it was basically the nominative taking over the accusative for my, whereas in Old Gag it was the other way around, the accusative taking over the nominative. And then actually from Old Tosk to modern Tosk or Avanitika as spoken in Greece, there's not a lot of changes, so only eat yote becoming eat ite. But in Gag they just continued doing some. So both of the dialect groups tried in some way to make the system more regular. So you can do see from the colors that both are trying their best to make it more regular. I think if you look at the colors, Tosk succeeded the best, and Gag still has to do a few things to make it even, but they're doing their best, and it yields interesting results in both cases. So to conclude, within Indo-European, Albanian is very challenging because we have so late attestations, so only from the last 500 years, more or less. But it is a very interesting case because we, as compared to other languages, so non-Indo-European ones with not a lot of attestations, it is Indo-European, so we know a lot about the nature of the language. So we know how all of the other branches developed. So we know what you can expect within Indo-European, and we at least think we have an idea about what the source language Proto-Indo-European looked like. So I'm not saying that you should try to work your way towards it. Again, the time distance is too big, but you do have some idea of where it comes from. Whereas, for example, for Basque, which is a language isolate, we have no idea about the source, so there you cannot reconstruct it in the same way. And something, so Albanian is a language that clearly has a long history of language contact and probably plurilingualism. This is usually what causes language change. So especially the big changes in Proto-Albanian, so like the vowel reduction, the umlauts, the palatalization. This was probably a period of time after the collapse of the Roman Empire. The Slavs and the Avars and the Proto-Bulgarians. There was a lot going on in the Balkans, and probably people were very multilingual in this period of time, causing a lot of language change. And of course in the Balkan Spraakpunt it has continued up until now. And something that I wanted to give you as advice if you are ever going to work on Albanian, some do's and don'ts when you start reconstructing. So do try to estimate the source of the word chronologically based on sound changes and developments that we know from Albanian. So which inner Albanian developments can you see? Always compare it with other Balkan languages. If you see something similar in Romanian, Turkish, Bulgarian, Serbian, Greek, then it's usually is a little bit more recent. If something is unexpected, search for models for analogy. Again, it seems like Albanian has quite a history of multilingualism, and L2 speakers are really good at applying analogy to a language that they are learning, and that's probably what also happens a lot in Albanian. So when something is not what you expect, probably analogy is the source and not sound change. And again, be especially careful about unaccented vowels. And according to me, what you shouldn't do is argue from Proto-Indo-European and close the gap. The time distance is too big. Or assume sound changes for every development that you see. In my opinion, from what I've seen from Albanian so far, analogical changes are way more common than sound changes. And never start with assuming an archaism. There are so few archaisms in Albanian. Innovations are usually the explanation. So always try to exclude innovations first before even thinking about an archaism. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gerard, for your so interesting and enriching talk.